Gordon's computer, wonderful. Thank you very much for that. Good afternoon. How exciting. Monday afternoon, the sun's out, and I'm very, very, very excited to be putting John Fuggles fiercely under my spotlight, okay? So John and I go way back, and I was thrilled when John joined Zoco. I mean, for a start, he didn't come to my free networking in the beginning of lockdown. He hadn't been inundated by thousands of emails from me, okay? And yet he came along once, liked what he saw, and joined up. And I've been thrilled. John's a giver. I mean, the advice he's given to people, reach out to him for business advice. He's been fabulous. John, you are welcome as a member of Zoco. Have you enjoyed it so far?
I have, thank you. It's very kind of you to say those things as well. But networking is about giving. If you turn up with a, take attitude, you're not long for this kind of thing.
No, exactly. No, but as John and I go way back, we've actually physically met. We met with Rebecca probably in Putney many years ago. So, but we haven't networked together for
years.
Many years. So again, welcome aboard. And so John has sent me his questions, fascinating questions. Okay, so all I remember about John is his passion for Japanese cars.
Yes, well, yeah, but that came about by accident, which is interesting enough. And I have to also say now, passionate about French cars, but I should say, and English cars, because I have to say that because they've been paying me as well.
Oh, of course, absolutely, yeah, right. But let's pin you. And let us go, okay? Pin John and pin me. Wonderful. Right, so John, thanks for your questions, okay? I'm going to launch into question 7, which is great. So, I mean, we're going to talk about what you do all right, well, let's start. You give us your 60 seconds, if you like, so people roughly know what you do.
Oh, see, I have an issue with that as well. When you go to these networking things, people go 60 seconds, and I get elevator pitches. The problem is we are too obsessed with the elevator pitch, and there should be multiple elevator pitches for multiple people, depending on the scenario, the person, all that kind of stuff. The problem is you go to networking events and people have this 60 seconds and they trot it out with no consideration for anyone that's listening, no consideration for the audience, no consideration for who they're trying to target on the call. And you hear the same thing again and again and again. So I've wasted 60 seconds already by not answering your question.
So what would you like to do, a 10-second or a 20 minutes?
Other than to say, I run a company, we're a business consultancy, but we advise clients on what it is they need to do to grow their business from a point of view of strategy. It's not sales and marketing, it's not campaign building, it's not funnel building and pipelining, and it's not all those kind of operational tactical things. This is purely about, we are here, we want to get here, haven't worked out how to do that. How do we do that? And we are the guys who fill in, and ladies, who fill in that journey for you. That's what we do. But so the 60 seconds or less, I struggle with that.
Yeah, but presumably there's a lot to do with it can be sales strategy, it can be funnels. I mean, those are steps that people can use to get from A to B.
Well, yeah, but they're not the strategy; they're the tactics. So the strategy is really simple. You're a rugby fan, right? The strategy is we're going to play a scrummaging game. We're going to drive. We're going to put the ball up our shirt, and we're going to keep. And you get out on the field, and every single one of them is 3 stone heavier and 4 foot light, 4 inches taller. Yeah. Now your strategy is something different, and it changes, but you need to have a strategy. Right. When they kick you in the shins and you want to punch them on the nose, that's tactics.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so I'm going to jump straight to question 7, which is a brilliant question, John. Okay. One piece of advice for anyone today who is struggling in their business or perhaps is doing very well, but wants to do better. One piece of advice. I can't believe it's one piece of advice, John.
Well, so experiment and don't be afraid to fail. We worry too much about the F word in this country, about failure. And failure is a sign of effort and success. You learn more through failure. So one piece of advice, try stuff, do stuff, be prepared to experiment, be prepared to fail. I tell people that 2020 was the best chance in history any company is going to have to experiment because of everything that happened. All bets are off. So if you didn't experiment and do loads of different things in 2020, you missed the best opportunity you're ever going to have. It doesn't mean you don't do it now. Now we're in 2021. It just means the rules of the game are slightly more constrained and confined. But the one piece of advice: try stuff, do stuff, experiment, and accept failure as part of the process and learn from failure quickly and move forward.
That's a brilliant piece of advice. I mean, I don't take failure personally myself very well. I'm learning to occasionally, okay. But again, you think about the successful entrepreneurs out there. Every single one of those successful entrepreneurs has a litany of failures behind them, and yet they haven't given up, have they?
There's a statistic somewhere. Every millionaire in the US, on average, has 2 company failures behind them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, how many light bulbs were invented before Thomas Edison got it right? There's all sorts of apocryphal stories about that, but loads for sure.
And sometimes too many people try it, don't work, and that's it. They give up.
Yeah, but you got to learn from the failure.
Yeah.
You've got to learn. Was it me? Was it the company? Was it the timing? Was it the product? Was it the customer? What was the reason it failed? And then apply the learning from that, and do it quickly. Don't ponder on the failure. Move forward quickly.
Yeah, but I'm getting better. But again, that's another my own work into my own brains, another subject, or for another podcast all by itself. But we'll talk about another day. I mean, a great question, John, and these are great questions. Well, let's go back to Mission 23, the company called Mission 23. Why 23?
Well, why mission? Because mission is a very powerful word. If you're on a mission to do something, you have a clear purpose and objective and goal and target. It's a very powerful word. Why 23? It helps if you speak Japanese, and I'm not going to tell you why. You have to go and find out for yourself now. Okay,
good. 23 is right. Okay, 20. Why? Why 23 in Japanese, John?
Well, 1, 2, 3 in Japanese is Ichi Nissan, and I was involved with Nissan. And when they race, most of their cars are 23. I've now told you, save you doing the research, but as you asked the second time, I'll be nice.
Interesting enough, 23, the substitute on a rugby pitch is quite a lucky number. David Beckham was 23. I think LeBron James is 23. So it's a lucky number.
Michael Jordan was 23.
Was he Michael Jordan also? Exactly. Yeah, there you go. I love you. You mentor for startups. I mean, this is brilliant to hear. I mean, that must be exciting. But you also mentor for startups that are listed in Startups of London's People to Know. Doesn't surprise me. What do you enjoy about working with startups and scale-ups, and what's the difference?
Well, so the thing with startups is, first of all, there are a lot of very clever ideas, and there are a lot of very clever people, and it's not common that you get clever ideas and clever people together. And when you do, it has the potential to be a great startup. I do some mentoring through for 2 groups, one of which is called See Ready, the other one, it's a bit confidential, but it's good fun. These people are super bright, super creative, and I get to pick and choose. Some people have some completely bonkers ideas, and I tell them, and some people are themselves completely bonkers, and I tell them as well. But I get to choose, so it's kind of cool to be involved.
If it's a bonkers idea, do you encourage them to have a go anyway, or tell them a bonkers idea, don't do it?
No. My job is to mentor them. So if it's a bit nuts, I'll tell them it's a bit nuts and why. Right? Again, we're back to maybe they just need to experiment with the idea a bit more. But the cool products with the cool people, the smart ideas, are great. And I'm working with some of them. One was recently featured in a national newspaper, and he's going to be on TV soon. And it's great to have been involved in that right from the beginning. So it's just part of that evolution of working on something that might eventually become something. It's kind of cool. The difference between startups and scale-ups, they're just fundamentally different. A startup is everyone does everything that they need to do, and you just make it happen by hook or by crook. When scaling up, you've got to start applying processes. You've got to bring a lot more discipline and structure into it. So they're quite different animals. And I work for some scale-ups as well. So it's good fun.
I mean, with startups, isn't it all about we need money? I need money to start a business. Part of your job is to remind them, actually, you don't. Actually.
Well, I mean, everyone needs money, and there are a lot of startups are bootstrapping and struggling. Let's be honest. The reality, if I ever have a startup approach me and the first thing I want to do is offer me equity, that worries me, right? Because if they're that keen to give away equity, they don't see any long-term value in it. They're giving away so much of the value of the company early on. That's worrying. The more reluctant they are to give away equity, and the less they're willing to ask for money, means the more committed they are to making it work.
Interesting.
It's quite an interesting thing.
And off the top of your head, can you think of the most nuts idea of a business anyone's approached you about or talked to you about?
Yeah, there was a guy who came up. I got he had this idea that there's a lot of people out there who don't eat regularly. They live on the streets and so on and so forth. And he had this idea that when you go into a restaurant, you could overpay by 20% on your bill, and they would, instead of giving the money to some charity, they would actually make an extra meal and give it to some homeless person. And I can well, actually, hang on. First of all, between 20% and 30% of restaurant food is wasted anyway. Why can't you just use that and be a bit more creative? And you've got people like Pret who are very, very good at that. But my question was, how do you get this meal to the person? And he said, well, they would come to the restaurant and they would know that you're doing that. And I went, so hang on a minute. I'm now having, it's our wedding anniversary. I've taken my wife out to a really nice meal. We're just sitting there and, someone who hasn't washed for a month walks past to collect. I said, I'm never going to that restaurant again. But the reality is he clearly, this chap, clearly saw something that he wanted to do to make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And he was looking at it purely from the restaurant point of view and purely from, the end consumer point of view, if you like. But he hadn't thought through one of the most fundamental details. It's no longer trading.
Yeah, I often, my brain is like that. I instantly want to know exactly how he's going to work. I'm happy to hear big ideas, but my brain immediately goes to yes, but in exactly how is it going to work? How is it going to go from A to B?
Yeah, I mean, if he'd have worked it through, I'm sure he could have found a way. But he was absolutely adamant that that's how it's going to work. And yeah,
I'm sure the rest of them would have loved the whole collection of homeless turn up collection there for him. Sure. Well, Louise, let's move on to your Seedcast live streams. They're ever entertaining. So I watch your Seedcast sometime on Tuesday. It says here sometimes really useful stuff. You put the word sometimes really useful stuff. All the time, good, a little bit more amusing. Okay. What is the objective with Seedcast?
What's the objective? So fundamentally, nothing. So and I say that with positive intent. Nothing is not always negative. There are so many people out there, organizations out there, giving stuff away for free, but there's always a hook, and that's fine. That's business, right? But the reality is, Ant Baker and myself, we've known each other a long time. We get on socially. We are very, very different in personalities and attitudes, and our outlooks on a lot of things. We work in different industries. And we regularly have a weekly call between the two of us, and over one of those conversations, we should just film this because it's quite, he always has ideas. I always have ideas. I'm trying to help his business. He's trying to help mine. We have common, associates and business people. We have common challenges. We have different challenges. And we just decided that it would be good to film it. And then we decided, well, if we're going to film it, we'll do it live. It's completely unscripted. The nearest we get to planning is he'll send me a text or I'll send him a text saying, what should we talk about? And you'll get a 3-word answer. And that is it. Mm-hmm. The feedback we get about 2,000 people watch it currently. The feedback we get is as useful information, as good information that gives people insight and ideas. So the objective is just that. It's just to share some of those opinions and views and ideas. And, it does raise my profile. Yes, sure. And it raises his profile. Yes, sure. But at no point are we ever going to start charging for it.
Yeah. And what is Ant Baker's background? What's his story?
So he's as if you've listened, you would have known that he mentioned on at least once a month that he's an 8-time world windsurfing champion. I say that tongue in cheek because he always does mention it. He works in the recruitment industry, so very different industry to me. But the reason I glibly sort of give you a bit of post about his history is that's kind of how it is. It's very tongue in cheek, and he'll say stuff and I'll rip into him and vice versa. Yeah. In a polite way.
Of course, nice way, and nice guy. I mean, I do enjoy them. They're very, very easy to watch, very engaging. I really thoroughly enjoy them. Obviously, two men who know their stuff. So, I mean, why wouldn't you want to listen to two guys who know their stuff?
And the reality is, you'll watch it and there'll be one thing that you go, that's interesting, or sometimes you watch it and there's nothing in it for you. It really just does depend what the subject is. And the subject can be, all sorts and anything. It really does vary. And we kind of just look at what's going on in the world and pick something. The other thing is it's always positive. If we're going to talk about lockdown, we won't talk about lockdown. We'll talk about, something else, the changes that it's brought about in a positive way.
I think you covered American politics quite a bit. It's certainly got duller the last few months. So a lot less to talk about from over the pond, isn't there?
has American politics got duller? Well, yeah, I don't think it's got duller. Less volume for sure. It's certainly got more interesting. Some of the changes that have happened already are quite significant. So I wouldn't say it's got duller. Just probably.
Okay, so we are. It says here we are halfway through 2021. Oh my word, how did that happen? 2020 was a year like no other for most businesses. What should companies be thinking of now?
Well, I talked earlier about experimentation. So just do a review of what you've done so far this year and see what works and doesn't work and plan ahead. We are going to get back to, we talk about new phrases like hybrid working, and you keep getting the new normal and all those kind of other horrible phrases that people chuck out there. But you need to understand, for you, what does the future look like? In 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months' time, how much of your time is going to be online? How much of your customers' time is going to be online versus before? How much, in the UK, 30% of our spend is online. That's streets ahead of most of other countries, 10% in France, a bit more in Germany. So what does the future look like for you, for your clients, for your customers, for your suppliers? And try and understand what that's going to look like and navigate a path to get there in a way that benefits you. So if most of your business suddenly went online, how much of it is going to stay online? If it's a third, then you need to focus on the 70%, 66% that isn't. If it's going to be, most of it is going to stay online, then that's your focus. So understand the changes that are happening and try and forecast what it's going to look like and build towards that now.
Okay. Back to Mission 23. Not just you, apparently, says here. Tell me about the people you work with and why. That's a good question. Why do you work with them?
Why do I work? So all the people at Mission 23 are people I've worked with in the past. A couple of them were actually customers of mine, interesting enough. But they're all different backgrounds, different skill sets. And by that, I mean, they've worked in different industries. They have different expertise. One is the ex-CFO of a company. The other one is an ex-hospitality vice president of another company, and works in recruitment. I don't, and so on and so forth. Really different backgrounds, really different skills. And that's what makes us strong. That's what makes us unique. We're not all marketing people. We're not all recruitment consultants. We're not all finance directors. Different skills, different backgrounds, and different industries. So when we get a client and they are this type of business, we have a good skill set that we can match in terms of the industry, but also in terms of the functional requirements. And that's why I like working with them, because we have monthly team calls and everyone has a different perspective and a different view and a different idea. No two people agree at the start of the conversation, which is brilliant, because that is how you get creative.
Of course. So what's the first thing you look for in a client?
An open mind and an attitude that says, I'm willing to discuss. They don't have to do everything we tell them. They don't have to listen to every recommendation. But if you meet a client and he says, look, I want to work at this, don't go after this, don't look here, don't open that. You kind of go, well, hang on a minute, why? So I'm not saying we would change everything, but if you don't have an open mind, if you don't have an open attitude, you're not the right person.
And you presumably ditched many clients because they just wasted.
So I've ditched many clients. I've struggled at times. I've walked away from clients. Yes, I can think of one client. It was last year. We got about 3 months into what should have been a 9-month project, and the more progress we made, the more the founder, chief exec, was digging his heels in. And I just had a conversation and I said, look, we're working against each other rather than for each other. I suggest we stop. And he reluctantly agreed, which is interesting, because the conversation only came about because of his lack of flexibility. It doesn't matter that we come up with 10 ideas and you decide to implement none of them.
Of course, as long as you're willing to listen to the ideas.
Is before we even started, he says, I don't want those 5 ideas.
Well, do you have a kind of typical client you work with? I mean, obviously you like the car industry, but any particular clients you work with?
Well, no, there are certain industries that I don't enjoy. CMG is something I don't enjoy. It's difficult to be strategic in that. But we'll work in most industries because, if
sorry, please forgive me, remind me, CMG, remind me.
Fast moving consumer goods, Mars bars, if you like,
Okay, fine.
So if a hotel has got the same problems as a coffee shop, right? Which has the same problems as I don't know, a pharmaceutical company. It may manifest itself in different ways, and it may have different challenges and nuances, but it's still the same thing. It is all about how do you sell more stuff, whatever the stuff is, to more people to make more money. So in terms of industries, medium-sized and small-sized enterprises, the kind of single high street coffee shop I just mentioned, not really. It's difficult to be strategic with that. So it tends to be slightly more complex businesses.
I mean, I can think while you're talking, I can think of two programs I adore on the television: The Hotel Inspector with old what's her face, Rocco's daughter, whatever she was, and amazing. And of course, restaurants. I mean, Ramsay, Restaurants from Hell, or Kitchen, amazing. They go into businesses. It's fairly obvious to the rest of us what the problem is, but the owners don't see it, and then they come up with a solution.
But the owners may see it, but to a lot of owners, it's their train set, right? And that's something that good entrepreneurs are good at. They recognize there's a point at which they need to let go. There's a point at which process needs to come in, other people need to come in. You need to hand over stuff. And I've seen clients of mine struggle with that, and I've said to them, I need you to write this down, and I will tell you what is ineffective time now. And they don't like it because they've always done that, and they enjoy doing it. And we do go to work to enjoy ourselves despite being paid. So it's a struggle for people, but there does come a point in any business when it's no longer your train set. It's got to be a bit more grown up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Well, there's only a couple of questions left, but we aren't going to throw. But you offer growth strategy consultancy and advice. Growth strategy consultancy and advice. What is growth to you?
So there's good growth and bad growth, right? You can just sell more stuff, and grow the revenues, but not grow the net retained profit by very much. That's not good growth. Good growth is you're working harder, you're selling more, and the line between revenue and profits is growing. So your margins are growing. So that's good. So growth for me is about, I said earlier, growing any business is really simple. You just got to sell more stuff to more people. The strategy is knowing what stuff to sell, where to sell it, to whom to sell it, and at what price. Too often, we focus on sales without understanding what the opportunity cost of doing something else, what the real cost of the business is. I had a client, great client. Myself and one of my colleagues, we did a really detailed analytical study of their performance. And there was a sizable piece of their business that they thought was very profitable, and it was profitable. However, it took longer to sell. The win ratio was lower. It needed special conditions, which needed additional, terms and so on and so forth, which had therefore a cost. The cost to support it was higher. So actually, what looked like good business, was still profitable, but nowhere near as profitable once every element was factored in. And every time they won a deal, and they every pound they won was actually a pound they lost, because they could have made £2 doing something else. So it became quite challenging for them to sort of say, okay, we need to stop selling this stuff. It was 2 products in one country to a particular type of industry. So very narrow. And they stopped focusing on that and move forward. But on the face of it, they said, but this is good business. And it did look like good business until we literally stripped away layer by layer by layer and got right into the detail. So sometimes even successful businesses and very clever business people, the analysis that's required doesn't happen because it's grown up over time and it looks good.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm gonna. So I can't believe the time. It's whizzed by. I really enjoyed this. I'm gonna call the rest of the room back, Rebecca and Helen. So, Rebecca or Helen, do you have any questions for young John?
Young?
I have a question.
Please,
how do we find? I haven't experienced Seedcast, although I have heard of it. Where do we find your Seedcast?
So it's seed-cast.com. So we broadcast live. We used to do on Clubhouse, but we've given up on Clubhouse because I think that's going to die. So we bailed out early.
Interesting.
But it's broadcast live on Ant Baker's LinkedIn profile, his Facebook profile, my Facebook profile, Seedcast Facebook profile, Mission 23 Facebook profile, my Twitter profile, and on Seedcast, seed-cast.com website. Tuesday, 7 o'clock every week. And feel free, we encourage people to feedback, comments, ask questions, etc., etc.
And you never know, you might fancy having special guests on board one week, possibly an expert on networking or a graphic designer, possibly expert. You never know.
Possible. You never know. We've had obviously. So Ant was ill last year, so we had a couple of standing guests, and then we thought we'd experiment with guests. And we had one from Zoco, who was lovely, and then we had two others that. So we don't always have guests. We are considering having guests again in the future, but I think. Sometimes we've got to get the balance right with the number of guests we have and the amount of time just Ant and I, because it is difficult as a guest. You come in, we know each other very well, and knows when to interrupt, when not to, etc., and vice versa. So when you're a guest in there, you're walking into an established room, if you like, and it can be a bit difficult.
It is, I mean, the whole Zoom etiquette. I mean, I think we do quite well, but we all still learn, aren't we? Okay. Well, any other, Rebecca? Do you have a question or a thought before we wrap up?
Yeah. What would be your ideal new client?
Great question.
Big company or a small company or just anyone?
It's not too big.
I'm going to answer that question for John, and let me answer that question for John. John is looking for a decent sized client, but he's looking for a client with an open mind. He's looking for a client who's willing to learn, willing to change, willing to take advice. He loves to work with big companies, but he doesn't mind who he works with as long as they have money to pay his bills, but they are open-minded and are willing to learn. Am I right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't want to get involved in huge clients because you end up dealing through layers and layers and layers of management. I like to talk to the decision maker, the business person. So, turnover is an interesting thing. We try and avoid turnover because if you're selling Rolex watches versus Timex watches, you're doing the same thing, but your turnover is fundamentally different. But up to 100 people, maybe 70 people, no more than that, because bigger than that, we're getting into structures and organizations and stuff.
In my brief foray into economics at O level, I believe, elasticity of supply and demand, genuinely quite interesting. Why sell 1,000 things at £1 if you can sell 10 things at £1,000? And I did it at such a ridiculous level. It was interesting.
Well, that's it, because I occasionally lecture at the University of West London in that kind of stuff, all about profit optimization and all those kind of stuff. So it's really interesting stuff for me. It is anyway. Yeah,
well, I only touch upon it. Was it Keynes?
Well, if you're still reading Keynes, you're out of date.
This was 44 years ago. Yeah. Well, I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I cannot believe how quickly it's gone by, John. I mean, I really, genuinely, honestly, I was so thrilled when you joined Zoco, genuinely. So I've known you a long time, and you only came to one meeting, and you're a genuinely nice guy who's happy to give advice. But you have got some work, I gather, through Zoco.
I have, yeah, and I've got a number of projects at the moment that have got Zoco people working either for me or potentially waiting in the wings to start a project. So the power of organisations, is knowing who's in the team and knowing who you can rely on and what skills they bring. Not right at the beginning you were talking about 60 seconds. Well, if you just listen to everyone 60 seconds, you don't get what they do.
Yeah,
you need to invest time in understanding what people can do and what value they bring.
Well, I definitely obviously lean on you to help me grow Zoco, obviously, and I'm sure you help me grow Zoco because global domination is I'm quite keen on it, John. Okay.
Okay.
So thank you so much, John. I really enjoyed it. Really appreciate it. Thank you. So I will stop recording now.